Welcome back, everybody, to Disc Media, a startup story, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of starting a business from the ground up, or we've been telling you about starting our business from the ground up and talking about people who start businesses, who help businesses thrive. And today we're going to talk about a business that is kind of relative, but still a little separate from what we do because, we started Disc Media with this idea of helping managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do. And we have purposely kind of stayed away from, I think, some of the topics we're probably going to get into in this episode, which is going to be interesting and fun. But let's go ahead and talk about today's guest. So our guest today is somebody who has been in this media space for some time. They have worked for media companies, have worked with content related to politics, content related to all sorts of things. And most recently, they have started a business called Off the Press, which is its goal to help the media become, let me see, how do I put this? Help those better build confidence and trust in the media that they're reading. And there's a lot to get into as it relates to this. I want to welcome to the show today, Julian Barron. Julian, how are you?
I'm doing very well, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think we are going to have a lot to talk about as it relates to the state of media, the state of business in media. It's just a pleasure to chat with you about it. I think we're going to have a really good conversation on a pretty complicated topic.
I think so too. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I was kind of dancing around the fact, politics is not one of the things that we really get into very often here. I have a very broad-based approach. The overarching goal, as I mentioned, help managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do. And I think when we start getting into politics, all of a sudden people are either going to tune in or tune out, depending upon how they feel your narrative is positioned. And so, I try to keep to policy, if you will, keep to the rules of business, keep to the things that are, despite what side you fall on, we've got to navigate around that. However, politics are kind of embedded in the things that we do. And you have this angle of talking about trust as it relates to media and some of the challenges that has created over the last couple of years. And so I thought, you know what? Trust plays a big role in business, plays a big role in leading teams, plays a big role in leadership. And so I thought, yeah, we should connect. We should talk about this. And I would love to know, kind of based on your experience in media, what was your point where you said, of all the media voices out there are plenty. I need to do something that's a little bit different from the experiences I've been having. So what led you to Off the Press?
Oh, what a fantastic question. It's interesting because it was a whole myriad of different factors that led me to where I am today. I think, and it's interesting you talk about like business and the dynamics of the marketplace. I think really what it came down to first and foremost was just the reality of the business. I think that when you look at the state of media in this country, there has been a dramatic shift toward social media in terms of news consumption. And you know, like you, what I try to pay attention to is changing dynamics of industries and the changing moods of business and the changing user and consumer habits. And one of the things that we've seen in this country over the past 2 decades is a dramatic shift in the way that people consume news. If you look 2 decades ago, people relied pretty heavily on some potpourri, if you will, of websites, television, and print. And that was really kind of the predominant mix. What we've seen since then is a dramatic shift towards social media. And if you look today and you look this year, and I say this year, it's really 2025, but for the first time, the majority of Americans considered social media to be their primary source of news. That's the first time that that's happened in the history of our country. And so what that tells you is that these legacy platforms, television, print, etc., are falling by the wayside in terms of consumer popularity. Does that necessarily mean that the journalists that work in those places aren't doing great work? Of course, many of them are doing great work. But what it means is user habits are changing, and they're changing rapidly and dramatically. And so, my perspective on shifting sort of the course of my career and jumping into something like off the press was that those who understand the way that people consume news are going to be best positioned for the future. And that is really the bedrock of my philosophy, which is you can't do anything effectively. And this isn't just for news, this is for anything. You can't do anything effectively unless you understand the needs of the consumer. You can't. The needs of the consumer are paramount in practically every business,
Yeah.
and even businesses that service other businesses. Your consumer is still the end point, and you're still considering what's most important to the consumer. And so that was really the driving principle for me is the consumers in this country are screaming out. They're saying, we want to consume our news on social media. That's where we're getting our news. And so I think we're going to continue to see that trend accelerate over the next 10 years. And I think that, frankly, those who understand that now and learn to navigate that landscape now will be best positioned to disseminate and distribute news moving forward in the most effective way possible. So that's really the nutshell answer to your question.
Yeah, interesting. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So first of all, when it comes to social media, when it comes to news being consumed that way, there's a lot of traditionalists and there's a lot of people who are not up, aren't feeling it. And, like I always say, you could shake your fist at the sky all day long, but it's not going to change the market. And the market is what the market is, whether you like it or not. And so you either kind of figure out how to move with where the market is, or you end up doing something else. And your audience size gets smaller. Doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing, but it's a natural reality of things. It's going to be smaller. Voice of the customer is really important. It's one of the things, I have a background in operations and supply chain. One of the things we talk about is you always first listen to the voice of the customer. So if the customer's saying, here's where we want things, then that's just where you need to be. But the challenging thing in my head to that is what platform and what is the algorithm serving up to you? Because that really, I get that people want to go to social media for their news, but that's much different than going to your front door, right? and picking up the newspaper. I go old school. Um, and one of the challenges about using social media, I think, as a platform for news is, there are so few editors anymore. Anybody can say anything anyway, and as long as it fits your algorithm, you're going to get fed that, right? And so, I mean, how do you navigate in that world of I want to get my content in front of people and get them to understand, and this is where that whole trust thing comes in. Who do you trust and how do you trust them?
It is an exceptionally difficult dilemma,
Yeah.
right? Because to your point, and it's 100% true, the algorithms are in control. And so, as opposed to the olden days when editors, both in television and print, had the final say, they were the gatekeepers of whether or not people would see content. These are people that were trained to search for, facts and truth and all of those details that we hold so dear. That doesn't exist anymore. It is purely a um, gratification game, right? And as we all know, the algorithms reward engagement. They reward if somebody pays attention or interacts with a piece of content, that content is then more likely to get shared and promoted to other people. And so the dilemma that you're pointing to fundamentally is the one that I'm trying to combat because I am of the belief that nobody, no single individual, no publication has the ability to change consumption habits in this country as it pertains to news. It took decades to get to where we are today. And I actually do not think that news funneling almost entirely through social media is a good thing for public discourse. In fact, I think it's actually a bad thing for public discourse. But what I do understand is that I could wish for it not to be that way all I want. It doesn't make it so that it's not that way, right? I can wish that social media wasn't the predominant source of news for Americans, but does that mean anything? No. I think we have to live in the world of reality, and the world of reality is yes, it is the predominant source of news for Americans. And so my perspective on it is the most effective way to fight misinformation and disinformation is with good information. That's my perspective. And so one of the things that we really try hard to do at Off the Press is position ourselves where we are delivering content in a responsible way, in a factual way, but we're doing so in a way where we also know that we have a shot at the algorithm, right? Because if you're putting content out into the ether and you're not curating it in such a way where it has a chance to get into those algorithmic spaces, it's like a tree falling in a forest. No one's going to know that it fell, right? No one's going to see it. But if you position it in such a way where you can get it into the algorithm, all of a sudden you are going toe to toe with potentially inaccurate information that's being distributed in the algorithm. And that to me is the reason why social media for responsible news producers is so important because I think, and I don't say this as a diss to legacy news folks, but I think a lot of people who have worked in news for a long time have kind of written off social media. It's been like, oh well, stuff on social media, you can't believe it, you can't trust it, blah blah blah. And that may be true, but here's the reality: as much as we say that, that doesn't prevent Americans from getting their news there. And so, if we want to actually inform the public, if we want to actually create an informed electorate in this country, the only way to do it is to provide information in the places where it's being consumed. And that's social media.
I recall the stories of when people used to trash television and watching the idiot box and having all sorts of opinions about that technology. And it seems like every older generation is always looking upon what is happening in the current generation and coming up with all kinds of reasons why it is somehow less than or not as good as. One of the challenges I think that every news organization has is, again, kind of breaking through that algorithm. Like, how do you reach um, how do you reach folks who have already created an established opinion about what they want to believe, even if the facts, even if the truth says something else? I mean, uh, there have been, and I don't care what side of the aisle you are on. I'm sure you can come up with your own examples of, well, there was this bit of information that the other side completely ignored, and to this day they still, deny X, Y, or Z ever happened. So, how are you guys doing that with the content that you have? Have you found any challenges in bridging that gap? And it's funny, like, people, facts be damned, they are going to believe what they believe, right? So how do you navigate that?
It's been tremendously challenging, and it's perhaps one of the biggest challenges of producing news on social media. I can tell you, I watch the posts that we put up very closely, and um, you can usually tell which algorithm you've been fed into based off of the comments,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because the comments are either going to be exceptionally pro whatever you posted or exceptionally against whatever you posted. And that's especially true on TikTok, I find, because the TikTok algorithm is just almost entirely based off of we want to make people feel emotion. It's doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's bad. They just want to make you feel something. And so TikTok, I'll often go onto our posts on TikTok and I'll look at the comments, and it's almost never an even mix. It's either we ended up in the Democratic algorithm or we ended up in the Republican algorithm. And that's pretty much it, right? Whereas the other platforms I've found, such as Instagram and Facebook and X, formerly Twitter, are much more likely to feed your content to a positive audience. So it's pretty rare that on those platforms I'll find people commenting on a piece of content in anger, in disagreement. It's usually we will end up with whatever side would support whatever is being displayed in that piece of content. So to fully answer your question, it is really difficult to strike that balance on social media because of how things are so algorithmic and because how these algorithms deliver content to people based off of what they're interested in. And I think it unfortunately, and this is perhaps the worst thing about social media as a source of news, it creates a worldview that is completely skewed, right? So if you only get your news from social media algorithms, right? You are likely to believe that much more of the world agrees with your perspective than actually does.
Yeah.
And that is something that I run into constantly with, especially with people who are like, and I don't say this as a slight to people who are older, but like people who are like 45 plus, 50 plus, speaking to people who are in that age group who use social media. Oftentimes they'll say to me, well, I go on my social media feed and all I see is this. And it makes them think that that is a reflection of the world. No, it's actually, and this is what I was telling them, it's AI is what it is. It's AI figuring out what you like and delivering that to you. I
Yeah.
think young people are much more savvy about that, and because they've grown up with it, and so they can sense that, and they're like, okay, my algorithm's feeding me what I want. Let me go outside of that potentially to find something else. But I actually think that middle age and older Americans are more susceptible to that problem, and it's one of the reasons why I think personally, as somebody that produces news, I take any opportunity I can to educate the public about the way that the algorithms work because I think it helps people understand that what they're seeing is not necessarily a reflection of reality.
Yeah, it's funny you say, that, younger people are more tuned into this. My daughter, yeah, she has a group of friends, we're all connected on social media, and it's funny because over the holiday, I had a advent calendar from BarkBox, and so every day I was filming my dog, and we would open up things, and I'd post it on TikTok. And I don't post a lot of stuff on TikTok, but I did a whole 24 videos every day. Every day I did one, and it was funny because I was teasing her. I said, "Well, how come your friend they never like it?" I'm like, "They say they love the dog, but I don't see any likes from them." And she goes, "No, he sees it every day. He just doesn't want to mess up his algorithm by liking it and then getting a bunch of dog videos." So, to that point, I mean, they're more aware of what triggers the kinds of things you're going to see in your feed. It's one of the reasons why, and I try and encourage people to do this too. Like every time you see a post that maybe doesn't hit, click on it, read it. If nothing else, like read the comments, read the first, paragraph or two, and then if it's not fitting, that's fine. But it's good to have a mix of things coming into your stream. And so I constantly try to balance my exposure to different things because that's the only way you're going to get a more holistic story of stuff.
It requires a exceptional amount of self-discipline
Yeah.
because the the reality I think is that all of these social media platforms are designed to be addictive. No different than a narcotic. I
Uh-huh.
mean, they are all designed to keep you on the platform as long as possible and to keep you craving the platform when you're not on it. And so the only way they're going to accomplish that is if they constantly feed you content that makes you engaged, that makes you happy, that makes you want more, right? I kind of liken this to, and this is one of the conversations, one of the analogies that I often use for people that don't use social media. You know, it's kind of like if you were sitting in front of a television and you were watching a newscast and you had a little dial, right? And you could like turn the dial to be more liberal or conservative depending on your worldview. That's effectively what these social media platforms are doing. You're just not controlling it directly, you're controlling it passively.
The fact that these social media companies um, have such understanding of the data coming through the dial. One of the things that I felt this last election when Trump was elected, when I saw Mark Zuckerberg, when I saw Google, when I saw Apple moving towards that direction, even before the election happened, I was like, I'm like, he's going to win. Because I think if you don't have a pulse on society like these companies do, because they do, because there's a lot of data, behavioral data that they get, they know which way the wind is blowing um, before the wind starts blowing. It's kind of one of the things that I tend to pay attention to is like, what are they saying publicly? Because chances are what they're saying publicly, of course, they're trying to remain in good favor with the public to the best of their ability. And there's always going to be people who criticize, people who hate, but I think they're very good at navigating that pulse of things. And when Zuckerberg is going on podcasts and he's talking about, oh yeah, no, the administration they were asking us to silence information. I mean, when you come out and you start talking that way, you're going to alienate a portion of the population. So you better be pretty confident in who you're alienating yourself against. And those are just kind of the things that I look for that are kind of happening in that space. But it is so weird. You mentioned TikTok, and I know off the press at least went onto the website, and there's a lot of. I mean, it's a website, right? So are you guys doing video content on these platforms as well?
Yeah, so we really have two parallel paths, right? We have our website, which is predominantly meant to serve the web consuming audience, which is predominantly 45, 50 plus. And then we have our social media operation, which is to serve everyone younger than that. And they work in tandem, right? The content is largely the same, but the way that it's delivered is different. So that older group is really accustomed to clicking on a link and reading an article. That's what they're used to, and that's what we deliver on the website. The social media audience is much more accustomed to watching a video or reading a caption of a social media post and getting the information that way, because they have been trained by these social media companies. You don't leave the platform, you stay on the platform. Getting them to link out is an incredibly exceptionally difficult task. Sometimes I would even classify it as impossible. So our perspective is you have to serve both audiences, right? And so we do them at the same time. And the way that we accomplish that is by leveraging as much public domain video as we possibly can so that we don't run into legal issues. And at the same time, getting very creative about how we deliver stories to social media. And so, for example, like we oftentimes will post what I call social cards, right? Where it's a graphic, it has someone's face on it, maybe someone else's face on it. It's got breaking on it, so it kind of tells you that this is something with a sense of urgency. And the reason we do that, and the reason it's so effective, is because humans are visual animals, and so the way to, especially the younger generation, and I say this as a member of the younger generation, it is exceptionally difficult to get anybody under the age of 40 to pay attention to anything if it's not shiny, sparkly, extravagant. It's very hard. So if you frame things that way, you can deliver responsible information to those people. You just have to be able to hook them. You got to be able to get them to pay attention at the onset. And that's the thing I find a lot of legacy media outlets struggle to do. They struggle to understand that you need to do something to get them in the door, right? And that, I think, it off the press is kind of what we embody, right? We're going to do everything we possibly can to reach news consumers in every single age group. And we're going to do things, and it doesn't mean messing with the facts. We're going to stay factual the whole way through. We're going to stick to the facts. We're going to keep our accuracy. Our accuracy is our number one priority. But the way that we deliver the content is going to be different. The same way, right? If you have an airline based in the United States, when you're flying in the air, you may serve steak, you may serve chicken, you may serve a whole host of, yeah, hamburger, you may have American foods, right? If you have an airline flying in China, you're going to serve Chinese foods. If you have an airline flying in India, you're going to serve Indian foods, right? It's the same concept. Demographics all demand different things. And that is so 100% true of age groups, especially as it pertains to consuming content. So that is really to your question about like, okay, we're a website, but we have so much more than that. It's because we want to reach everybody. That's our goal.
Yeah.
And we will go to the ends of the earth to do it.
When I started Dist Media, I'm primarily focused on website SEO, trying to get that content, writing articles for people who are in business and again, managers, leaders, entrepreneurs, right? So, and the content did well, and the site visits were doing well, and I didn't really pour anything into ads or anything like that. I actually, one of our early board members, somebody who was a journalist and in that industry, and one of the things he told me was like, grow it organically first. Like, don't even worry about ads, because if you can't get it going organically, the ad support, once it's gone, the audience will die off. And so, for the first couple of years, that's what we did. And then really over the last several months, pivoted more toward podcasting information, video podcasting, and everything has just kind of changed. Like, that seems to be the way. And looking at my demographic data of people who are engaging in the content, skews mostly male, but also 35 to 55 is kind of the sweet spot. We have some showings in other age demographics, but yeah, 35 to 55 male, seems to be our audience, primary audience demographic. But going back to, the fact that like we hit TikTok, YouTube, X, really kind of every platform, but video has really been the thing that resonated the most, which is kind of crazy. Because my feeling was like, oh, we'll put this written content out there, but people don't want to read. I don't want to say it that way. I just came out with a
No,
new
it's
book.
true.
Okay, I hope that people want to read, but when on social media, I will say they're not into long form articles. Just
No, no, they're not. But to your comment about your book, I think this is interesting, right? And this is like a great example of meeting the market, right? You put out a book, and that book is going to show up in a bookstore, and it's going to show up on the Kindle app. Those are places where people who want to read go,
yeah,
right? You can't force feed something on an audience that doesn't want it, right? And the majority of people on social media do not want to do an extensive amount of reading of long form articles. But here's the other thing, and to me, this is actually the larger phenomenon that's taken place. Social media companies made a determination, I don't know when it started, sometime in the middle of the last decade, that they were going to stop prioritizing links, right? It used to be that linking out was how you got your content, right?
yeah, building your
You click,
backlinks.
right. You click a link from on Twitter or on Facebook, and all of a sudden you're on a website, and you had to really kind of link out to get the content that you wanted. And the social media companies, I think, made this determination of like, okay, that's like us running like having McDonald's, right? And a customer walks in, and we say, here's a coupon to go over there to Arby's.
Right.
That's how they looked at it,
But
right?
keep
They
them
looked at it
in the
as,
environment.
right, we want to keep you here. We don't want to give you a pass to go over there. We want to keep you here. And so what these social media companies gradually did is they deprioritized linking. They made it so that if your content was not a link, it was likelier to end up in the algorithm. And then what you ended up with are platforms like TikTok, which really don't have any kind of linking at all. It's just video. right? There really is no function to leave the platform
Unless you're going
unless
to the
some
TikTok shop.
right, exactly. Unless you're going somewhere where the platform is making money,
Yeah.
right? So I think it is. I don't know if people realize how much of a monopoly social media companies have created on the information landscape. I don't think it's as well understood as it should be.
No, I would definitely agree with that. I don't think that people do, and how, it's interesting because, and again, this is this we can have our own personal feelings about this all day long, but the market is the market, behaviors are what they are, and this is how it is operating right now. I started out by saying, we don't have enough editors anymore in this world. Like, anybody can say anything at any time, whether it's true or not. And it's really up to the individual to do the critical thinking, to do the editorial, to decide what's truth, what isn't truth. And um, I think if you are a critical thinker, if you're somebody who kind of questions things, you're going to do okay. Um, if you're the kind of person who just doesn't want to think that hard about stuff, and again, this is not a slide on anyone. It's just that I know sometimes people are just like, look, I don't care. Like, I just want to be entertained, or I just want the thing to work, and I don't want to put too much energy and effort into it. I just want what I want without a lot of friction. I think that's where it gets a little bit more dangerous. I don't know. I don't know if I want to use the word dangerous, but a little more concerning, right?
Well, I think here's why I don't think your dangerous categorization is a bad one, because I think if you push it to the extreme, which is where I think we're headed,
Yeah,
it can become
it can.
dangerous, right?
Yeah,
I think that one of the fatal mistakes that I think our society made was trying to censor content on social media. Um, and the reason I say that is because I think the solution to the problem that we face in social media is one that needs to be approached as a constructive problem, a problem where we're going to provide a constructive solution as opposed to a destructive solution. And the destructive solution was we're going to take down things that we judge to be inaccurate or irresponsible or whatever it may be, right? And rightfully, people were very frustrated by that because the perspective was who's the arbiter of deciding what I should or should not see,
well,
right? That
that would be the Ministry of Disinformation.
right exactly. Well, you see what I'm saying, right? It's like it's this belief that there shouldn't be a big brother deciding, oh, this content is allowed, but this content is or isn't or whatever, that people don't take kindly to that. And so I think that there was a huge mistake that was made in censoring content because the backlash to that was so severe that now what you get is the Wild West. You get the Wild West on social media because the platforms are like, people are going to flip if we censor, right? And so we're going to go to the other side of the pendulum, which is have at it, post whatever you want, have a nice day, free for all. And and that is very bad for other reasons. And so I think honestly, what we need to do is we need to figure out a constructive way to solve that problem. How do we lift up voices, lift up responsible purveyors of content without censorship? Make it
Yeah.
a constructive act rather than a destructive act.
Well, and I think what Elon implemented with community notes is definitely something that helps because the community
Agreed.
polices the content, and that it's kind of a little bit of the Rotten Tomatoes thing, right? When enough people weigh in on one side, you tend to say, "Oh, well, it's probably." I think the community here tends to be is more right about stuff, right? There, and so allowing the community to kind of determine, I think, is very helpful. And I think how you allow that community to weigh in with the facts. I noticed one of the things on your website, like, you guys provide a fact sheet, if you will, like regardless of how you feel, here's the data and here's what we know about it. And I think more of that is definitely helpful.
I think you're absolutely right when you talk about community notes. I think community notes was a step in the right direction because it truly is the most democratic way to go about this, right? Some large subset of people believes that the information is not credible. You have certain people that are, qualified or pre-screened to be flagging content for community notes, and they contribute and people vote. I think it's a good system. I think it only gets you so far, though. I think that one of the like I follow me for a second on this
Yeah.
one. This is a little bit far fetched, but I have to bring it up because I think it's so relevant to what we're talking about. So, other countries have tried sort of solutions to the problem that we're facing here in the United States, and Canada went ahead and said, okay, these big social media companies are making a bajillion amount, like just tons and tons of money off of content that they don't own. I mean, that's just reality is when social media companies monetize the content that's on their platforms, uh, they're keeping the majority of that money. Even if you are monetizing it as a consumer or as a creator, I should say, the company's keeping the majority of that money. And so, what Canada did was they passed legislation that said, okay, social media companies are going to make X amount of money, and you have newspapers, for example, in Canada, that are producing a ton of content that's going on social media. Those newspapers have to be compensated for the money that the social media companies are making. It has to trickle down to the newspapers. And so there has to be some sort of an agreement that is negotiated between the two sides, and the Canadian government essentially is the arbiter in that. So in that way, it keeps the newspapers alive. It allows the newspapers and the news producers to continue to generate revenue off of the content that they're creating. What Meta did in response to that was they just pulled news from Canada. You can't get news on social media in Canada on Meta platforms. You can't get news on Facebook. You can't get it on Instagram because the calculation that they made was it's not worth it. It's not worth it to us. We we want to keep all the money. We have to keep all the money. And if you're going to make us split it with the people that are creating the content, we're just going to leave. See you later. Now, they couldn't do that in the United States because the market is so much bigger, right? And I think at some point we're going to end up in a world where legislation like that is going to have to be considered. The issue is how much does Silicon Valley own Capitol Hill? Ultimately, that's what we're going to find out over the next several years.
Well, not just Silicon Valley, but one of the big issues in media overall. So I'm going to date myself here, but when I was growing up, you had local news, and you had the local newspaper, and you had national news for a half hour, and this is pre CNN. You had a limited number of dials on the TV, and so most of the information you got was really dictated by what you received locally. And over the many decades, and me having been a paper boy many years ago when that was a job, um, we have moved away from local news. Local news is now, if anybody watches local news on their television during the broadcast, because most people just pick it up on clips again on social media, but if you happen to watch local news, the local news stations are all owned by bigger outfits, right? Local newspapers, as a matter of fact, my wife and I, we subscribe to our local paper. It's a digital thing. We don't get it delivered, but we pay like $7 a month for the app to access our local community news. And people are I mean, they post stuff on Facebook all the time. The first thing people will say is like, you got a paywall, and they get all angry because they got to pay for the news. But here's the problem: local news is going away. We have news deserts where local news no longer exists. People don't know what's going on in their own community unless they read it on social media, which can be skewed and and kind of one-sided anyway. I don't I don't know how we solve this issue when you talk about the big social media platforms owning stuff, but there are big media platforms that own a lot of the local news, a lot of the local print news, if people are even reading it at all. I love the fact that you guys are kind of, I know you aggregate stuff, but your intention is to really try and reach more people with news and information that will help them, right? Just curious, like what do you see are some of the ways, I don't know if we can break through it, but like how do you deal with this challenge of the fact that like the way people become informed about things is just completely different?
There is no one way to fix it. If I had a way to fix it, I'd probably be a billionaire. We probably wouldn't be talking right now. So I think that it's one of those things that requires audience building because one of the critical reasons that Off the Press is so focused on growing its follower base is because when what you just described about local news, when those outlets go under, and it's going to happen, right? When they can no longer pay the bills, something has to fill the void. People aren't going to just stop getting news. Something is going to have to be there. And we want it to be something responsible. We want it to be something that people can trust. And that's why we're so focused on building this brand, is because there is going to come a day in the not so distant future when television stations predominantly are not producing news anymore. And if they are producing news, they're not doing it at the scale that they're doing it now. And there's going to come a day. I mean, look at what happened in Pittsburgh. Their paper of record shut down, right? Washington Post lays off massive parts of their staff. It is happening.
Yeah.
It is now. And so my view is if you're in a position, as we are at Off the Press, to have a very lean and mean operation, but to build audience at a rapid scale, you can be sort of the mattress that people can land on when the news ecosystem fully collapses as we know it today. Um, and that to me is really just like the number one reason why Off the Press is something I believe in, is because it's it's going to enable us to be there. Our focus now on social media is going to enable us to be there when the bottom drops out from news, and we want to be a safe place for people to land. We want people to know who we are and to trust us before that happens, so that we're not fighting with everybody when that happens to get that audience. People already know who we are, right? That's really important to us.
The things that I hear often about media and about this space, and trust is a big one, but how do you build trust when you have advertisers? One of the big challenges with big media, right, is that when you piss off an advertiser and they pull funding from you, that's a problem. I mean, we have a very consumer driven, advertiser driven model for so much of what happens in media. When Jimmy Kimmel made the news, because they had some affiliates who basically said, "We're not going to show, we're not going to show your stuff." Like that, when you have those kinds of disruptions in the profit model, that's when people make change, right? And I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of people saying, "Hey, we're gonna silence you. Uh, we're gonna boycott you." Again, not big into boycotts. I mean, people should make their own decisions about what they want. I don't think we need a big universal effort to do that. But how are you guys building a model that isolates you from those influential big dollar people who can at some point dictate the direction of the way you go. And that is the heart and soul of journalism, is independence, right? And so how do we thrive independently and still make money without the big people telling us what to do?
So I have so many different ways to answer that question, but I will tell you this. I've worked in the for-profit space, I've worked in the nonprofit space, and at Off the Press, we're entirely donor driven. And we have donors that say to us, all we want you to do is report the news responsibly. They do not breathe down our neck about what we post. They do not tell us, oh, you need to cover this that way or this another way. No. What they do for us is they say, we want you to go out there and we want you to be as fair and as accurate as you possibly can. And to your point about the for-profit space and news, heck yeah, there are a lot of factors that will influence, I think, coverage in the for-profit space and news, whether it's advertisers, whether it's partner companies. There's all sorts of different dynamics that can impact that. I think too, the reality is that for-profit news in this country will be a pipe dream so long as social media companies have a monopoly on information. That is just the fact of the matter. The revenue models that exist right now for the remaining print publications in this country are dying because predominantly the people that subscribe to newspapers are 75, 80 plus, and those people are not going to be around. I mean, I hate to be morbid about this, they're not going to be around for that much longer, comparatively speaking, right? And then the television industry, the hidden little trick that nobody tells you about the television news industry is that every single one of your local news stations is being subsidized effectively by football. The only reason why the carriers like Verizon and Spectrum and Xfinity and DirecTV, the only reason they carry local stations is because local stations have sports. And if people didn't get their sports, they would be upset.
Yeah.
And so effectively, what you have is you have news as kind of like a nice little throw in. It's like, oh, like news is on that station too. Yay. But like it's not the main event. And so what we see right now is the NFL is experimenting with streaming services for their
Yeah.
games. And when the NFL pulls the rug out from under broadcast television, it's over.
Yeah.
And that's going to be in the early 2030s.
That
It's over.
See, I always thought it was car companies and drug companies that propped it up. But
Well, yeah, okay, I'll answer that. It is partially right. Advertising revenue is significant for local television news stations, but here's this is the crux of it. These broadcast companies get paid carriage fees
yeah,
by Verizon, the
yeah,
providers, right? The cable providers, and that makes up a pretty considerable portion of their revenue. And if that were to go away, you don't have the ability to pay people to do news. You just don't. I mean, it's not there. I mean, maybe in some of the like outlier markets like New York City and Boston and Los Angeles and Atlanta and Chicago, maybe in some of those places you can get away with it just because of the number of eyeballs you can get. But the vast majority of them, if you don't have sports on network television, there's nothing to pay for.
what seems obvious right now, maybe I don't know if it seems obvious or not, but uh, if I'm a journalist, somebody who you're used to local television, you're used to the news story, the 6 o'clock hour and whatnot. It seems that if I really wanted to break into this independent game, I would create a YouTube channel to cover my local area. Somebody I had on a podcast many episodes ago, Perry Shara, she talked about she used to drive around in her car with a police scanner and waiting for a story to break and drive over to the scene and see what's going on. But there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't do that today. As a matter of fact, there's a guy I follow on YouTube, Penguin Six. He lives in the DC area. He's a photojournalist, covers the White House a lot, but a lot of just news that's going on in DC. And every single every couple days he puts out a video of just like, had to go here, had to go here, take pictures of this, that, and the other. Then he, posts at the end of his videos where his photos showed up. I can really see a world of journalists, especially independent journalists, because so many people freelance in the journalism world, like just creating a collection, YouTube creating a collection of journalists and just saying, here are all the local stringers in your area that are doing news. Here's a channel, I'll package it up for you. And then they make
That's
the
where we're
streaming
headed.
revenue off of that. Or anybody who's willing to put a something like that together and just reach out to all of these independent content creators and saying, hey, we'll do revenue splits with you, but everybody will come here to share the influence of what you got going on there.
That is where we're headed. I think what you just described is exactly where we're headed. And it's going to be a patchwork of independent creators, independent content creators who cover local areas. And at some point, I'm sure YouTube will probably create some sort of program where those people are able to monetize a little bit more effectively than normal content creators so that they can sustain themselves. And it'll be like YouTube's commitment to journalism or something along those lines. We're headed in that direction.
Yeah.
Right now, what YouTube does is they prioritize content from local television stations that's posted to YouTube. When that goes away, that what you just said is exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Because right now, local television stations post things to YouTube is just kind of like a brand extension. It's not their primary source of revenue. It never could be, right? It's just like a little added bonus. Like if you're a local television station, you're lucky if you make $50,000 a year off of YouTube. You're lucky, and $50,000, that'll pay maybe one journalist, right? Like that doesn't move the needle. Um, but if you're an individual, YouTube is a fair game, right? Because an individual can survive off of $50,000, and an individual is, in addition to that, can survive off of just doing that, of just doing YouTube, right? Um, so yeah, I think what you just described is absolutely where we're headed, and I think that is probably something you'll see take shape in the next five
I
years,
don't
maybe.
even think I don't even think it's gonna take 5 years because I think about all the people who are doing, van life or theme parks or I mean, you name it. And again, I'm a big YouTube consumer. Somebody who I followed and watched for the last couple of years, a guy by the name of Adam the Woo. He passed away, what's crazy is he passed away just before Christmas in his sleep, had heart issues. People like Entertainment Tonight wrote about it. People wrote about it. Like there were so many people who like knew of this person. He was the most well known unknown person out there. Because
Yeah,
a lot of times, I've mentioned his name to a few people, and they're like, "Who?" But the guy was known enough that he had celebrities commenting about it, like all kinds of people. And that's the interesting thing about social media personalities is that you could have somebody who's got 5 million followers you've never heard of.
yeah, absolutely.
It's the craziest thing. But
Well, it's market dilution, right?
yeah,
Is what it is, where you now have thousands upon thousands of content creators and they're all fighting over the same number of eyeballs, right? It used to be four networks and a couple papers, and now it's thousands upon thousands. So of course everyone's share is going to get smaller when it comes to revenue.
it is, but I would argue that it's not necessarily the same number of eyeballs. It's actually billions of more eyeballs around the world that you never had access to before. And
I think there's truth to that.
yeah, I think that that's what makes it a little bit different. That's what allows people who do independent content, independent journalism, the reach is so much different than it used to be.
It
Mm.
definitely is.
I love the fact that you guys are trying to work in this space, like kind of carve out your own niche and work on that model. Out of curiosity, so what are some of the things that you're most excited about right now for what you guys are working on?
Well, I would say first and foremost, the thing that I'm most excited about is the fact that we have built a following on Instagram, which is a skyrocketing news consumption platform. You look at data, it used to be like 2% of news consumers went to Instagram. It's like over 10% now in the United States. And so we've got, last year at this time, I think we had, and it's right around when I started with Off the Press, I think it was, gosh, maybe like 1,200 followers on Instagram, and now we have 126,000.
Nice.
Facebook was about 6,000, and now we've got about 223,000. And TikTok, we didn't have an account. Now we got about 50,000. So I think out of everything, I'm just so excited that we've been able to take our thesis about social media, which is people do want news on social media. They just need it fed to them. We've been able to take that thesis and prove it out. And now I'm excited because I think we're going to have the opportunity to scale this effort. I think we're going to have the opportunity to bring in more people this year who are going to be able to make our news coverage even more comprehensive, both off on our website and also on our social platforms. We're going to be starting a podcast later this year as well to extend the brand a little bit.
Nice.
Um, and ultimately, out of everything, I'm just excited that we are turning off the press into a known brand, especially among younger news consumers. It's a long-term bet, right? It's like investing in a stock portfolio, and you're not expecting a return in 10 to 15 years. That's what we're doing, right? We want it to be that, come 2035, when you mention Off the Press, people generally know what it is, and that's I feel like over the past year we have created a really solid foundation to that effort, and we're just going to continue to do it.
When you move those kinds of numbers, there's all kinds of ways, right? So right now we're on a march to hit 100,000 subs by the end of 2026, and we're just concentrating on that platform for a couple strategic reasons. But how are you guys? Is it content? Is it SEO? Are you doing any sort of paid ads or anything like that?
No, everything's been organic,
That's awesome.
and it has been solely because we understand two things. Number one, the content has to be curated to fit the user expectation on each platform. Each platform has different demands as it pertains to the way that content is structured. So leaning into that, but also speed to market. The internet moves at the speed of light, and something that we understand is if you're not first, you're last. And so for us, you know, when something big happens on Capitol Hill, we have that clip up in 10 minutes, not an hour, right? Not 30 minutes, 10 minutes, right? Because whoever can get it up first usually is going to be the one that reaps the most rewards. And so it's a combination of those two things, really, I think have led to the success so far. And look, the fickle thing about social media is that, the leaders of the social media companies could wake up tomorrow and be like, yeah, we're going to change things.
Yeah,
And it could
they've
completely
done it
change.
before.
Yeah, it could completely change. The entire strategy that we lean on could totally change within a blink of an eye, and we would have to completely rejigger the way that we do things. It's part of the game.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about like the speed to post. One of the things specifically that I've done with what we do is, it's very evergreen. Like I want people to hear this conversation a year from now and it be as relevant then as it is as we're putting this out. And so, but that's the kind of the fun thing. Like I don't have the bandwidth to try and do immediate kind of release stories, things like that. But man, that is awesome. One, that you guys have that kind of growth and you're continuing to expand. I would definitely throw YouTube into your mix because
Yeah,
again, that platform is number one streaming platform in the world.
it's been our slowest platform in terms of growth. We started with like 1,000 subscribers last year, and we're just about to hit 10,000, which not bad. But I think the challenge for us has been with YouTube having enough long form content to really make that significant subscriber leap. And I know you can do it with shorts. Shorts are a subscriber driver as well. Um, I actually think that I'm glad you brought that up. we are probably going to rethink our YouTube strategy this year, because I think what used to work for YouTube in terms of audience growth on shorts changed. And so the original strategy that we had for YouTube, I think, is actually a little bit antiquated, which is funny because we just made it 8 months ago. But I think some things have changed so that we need to shift. But you're right, YouTube is incredibly important, and we live stream so much to YouTube, and we post on YouTube as much as we possibly can, because you're right, that is a place that people are consuming content, and they're consuming a lot of news content.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. And I will say this when with YouTube, because, and these are some things I've picked up. I've actually invested some time in hanging out with, going to a couple seminars. I went to a VidFest and PodFest, learning from people who are doing this and really racking stuff up on YouTube and stuff. And so one of the things they talk about is, long form content, which, we do that. We do the video podcast, right? So we have that out there, but it's doing a mix of long form, short form, and mid form. And so taking, you guys are getting ready to do a podcast, like cutting that up into shorts. It'll also be your longer form stuff. You guys are doing live stream, but then, and even this is something I'm missing, like 6 to 8 minute long videos. Something that fits that midterm. Yeah, I feel like you guys probably are very poised to blow that up. So, and but
It's going to be an exciting ride.
The more you're growing on the other platforms, the more it helps you over there too.
Exactly. Rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Julian, where can people find you? Where do they go? How do they connect? Where do they find what's going on?
Go to offthepress.com, bookmark us, sign up for our newsletter, go to every social media platform and search for Off the Press. We'll be the first one that pops up. If you like news and you like responsibly sourced news, look no further, and help us, or let us help you, I should say, cut through the noise of social media so you continue to enjoy the news on social media, but let us help you do it. We love to be there for you.
Well, Julian, thank you so much for your time, for the good conversation. I loved it. There's so much going on in this space, and media journalism is just changing so much. But I love the fact that we don't have people giving up, that you're grassroots, you're independent, you're growing in the right direction. All of that is good stuff. So it was a great conversation. I appreciate having you on.
I really appreciate you having me. It was a fantastic chat, and let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For everybody else out there, thank you guys for checking us out. Thank you for checking out Disc Media Startup Story. Remember, do have a new book out. Would love it if you guys gave it a look. You can find it on my website, benolmos.com. Learn a little bit more about it. If you're not into the book, don't worry about it. Like, subscribe, share. Just tell your friends, tell your enemies. In fact, tell more enemies than friends, because that's really what's going to make an impact for us. Thank you guys for checking us out once again, and hope you have a good one. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening to Disc Media, a Startup Story. This podcast was produced and edited by Ben Olmos and is a production of Disc Media Corporation. If you're interested in learning more about anything you heard on this episode, please reach out to us at podcast@discmedia.com. You can also get more information about this and other episodes, or information about our guests, by checking out dailypitch.news, our business and insights publication focused on helping managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do.